Welcome to Inner Compass. I'm Karen Soppe. It's a country where a bowl of rice is an extravagance for many citizens, while the leaders order up another set of luxury cars, where reading the Bible or accidentally stepping on a photo of the supreme leader can land you in jail. Our guest today spent 4 years helping people escape from North Korea. Hear more about it today on Inner Compass.
From the campus of Calvin College, this is Inner Compass, exploring how people use faith and ethics to guide them through critical issues of today.
My guest today is Mike Kim, author of Escaping North Korea, Defiance and Hope in the World's Most Repressive Country. It's a current events memoir about his experiences helping North Koreans flee oppression through the NGO he started called Crossing Borders. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Karen.
As you began to work with North Korean population, were there stereotypes that you had to overcome in the way that you looked at them?
You know, I really didn't know too much about the North Koreans before I met the first one at the China-North Korea border. I remember in social studies class in junior high, the social studies teacher using North Korea as an example of an isolationist country. That's about all I really knew. Other than that, we never talked about it in our family. And the one story I did hear is of my grandmother's brother who was abducted by the North Koreans during the Korean War. And that's really all that I knew. I didn't have all that many stereotypes. At that time, this was 2001 when I went over there.
Okay. North Koreans have quite a lot of stereotypes about Americans. Can you talk about that a little bit and why that happens?
Sure. That I was fascinated with. I had no idea, but they have derogatory terms for Americans. And the Americans to the North Koreans are the most evil people in the world. They're the quote-unquote imperialists. The mission of the North Koreans is to save the South Koreans from the evil hand of the Americans.
So we're their axis of evil.
Exactly.
They don't know that's backwards.
Yeah, that's right. They do have their own axis of evil, and it's U.S., Japan. I've heard different versions of it, but the U.S., Japan, Israel being one sometimes in the three. But they do, and they had derogatory terms. I remember spending time with North Koreans, and they were so used to referring to Americans in a derogatory way, they'd do that in front of me, not even knowing what they were saying.
That's just the name
that
they call you. And that's really perpetrated like in school.
Yeah, that's right.
Officially taught these things
from a young age, and I remember some of the stories. And this is one of the things I enjoyed: meeting North Koreans, these people from this isolated country that really have no access to the outside world, and just asking them what was life like in North Korea. Tell me some stories about childhood. And one of the stories that shocked me was that they would build. As part of school activities in elementary school, they would build, for example, a snowman and put USA, on there, and then the kids would run with sharp, objects and be destroying it, or have pictures up, and with that, at a young age, they're taught to hate Americans or anyone really the regime points them towards with that type of intensity.
And they've been really isolated from any information that would counteract them, right, to an extreme degree.
Yeah, that's right. The amount of control is just unbelievable. I don't think you have any other place in the world today like that where they just aren't aware of the realities of the outside world. I tell this funny story of a North Korean delegation that visited Seoul. And, this was several years ago, but the North Korean delegation visited Seoul, and the hosting diplomat in South Korea had a good sense of humor. And the North Korean diplomat said, don't think you fooled me here. I know you've brought in all these cars here just to impress me from all over the country. And the South Korean diplomat, having a sense of humor, said, well, that was the easy part. The hard part was bringing in these skyscrapers.
And what I think I know about North Korea is that most of its citizens are living in extreme poverty, but they don't realize that it's extreme poverty. Is that correct?
There's a whole range. It's one of those things in North Korea, something's true and untrue at the same time. I mean, you've got the extreme levels of eating tree bark and grass to survive. There's cases of cannibalism in order to survive. And then you have the elite in Pyongyang, the loyalist families that are one of the top importers of Hennessy and, cognac and that type of thing. But yeah, the ones that are extremely suffering, I don't know how they define it compared to the outside world. That's something confusing that I've heard, because they know they're suffering. Mm-hmm. They know they're starving. They feel the hunger pains, and they think North Korea is a paradise on earth. So it's a big paradox. I don't fully understand.
When Kim Jong-il died, there was footage of all these people publicly mourning and really lamenting his death. They loved him. They adored him. He's a god on earth. Do they really believe that?
I think some definitely did. The interesting thing, when you look at that audience, there will be some that are full believers that he's a deity, and this family is a divine family. And there's also people that are faking, in that audience, and it's hard to tell like what percentages, but those are every year by year, the numbers are changing where more and more people are being exposed to the truth about that outside world. And I think a big part of it is the refugee flow. As North Koreans leave and return to help their families, they bring in information from the outside world. You also have campaigns going in through mobile phones, internet, whatever, DVDs, that you have this black market in North Korea. And through that, people are learning about the outside world. And it's a big challenge for the regime to control.
In your book, you mentioned, I think, South Korea dropping balloons into North Korea with information, and people would destroy the balloons. And so how did they get people to keep the balloons and the information, the tracks?
Yeah, that's right. The North Koreans will regularly complain about that issue to the South Koreans. And so we expect that it's having a major impact on the country, because they will come yelling into meetings, and this is one issue that they raise, just such a large fuss about. And there's people whose jobs in the North Korean military, that is, it is to pick up these pamphlets and pro-democracy pamphlets as they come in before the citizens can read them. And one story I often tell, there was one woman in our shelter. She was a former military officer that worked along the DMZ on the North Korean side. She told me, as I was talking to her, she said, and I would pick up the leaflets with a stick. And I asked her, why did you use a stick? And she said, because the regime taught me if I touch anything coming from South Korea, my hand would rot and fall off.
And she believed it.
And she believed that. And I think that just shows you the level of control that the regime can have on the minds, but thankfully that situation's changing.
So a funny little story, though, that one of the ways that this and it is propaganda, it's pro-democracy propaganda, right, is getting in, is that they've started publishing pictures of the ruler, of the North Korean ruler, on the pamphlet.
Right.
Why does that work?
Yeah, because then they're caught in this catch-22 where they can't, they're not allowed to destroy any images of the dear leader or their rulers. So they can't destroy it yet. They don't want to be caught because there's a message on there. So it's a bit of a funny situation where it's made it a challenge for them.
That's great. So you have become aware of people who are trying to defect, and explain for me, because and maybe we need to talk a little bit of the geography of North Korea. It would be much simpler to escape straight to South Korea, except that it's not simple. So instead they go by way of China.
That's right. South Korea would be, of course, the most direct route to get to South Korea, just crossing over, but it's the most militarized place in the world with landmines, soldiers, military, all of that. So the next option is China. It's a very long and porous border. It'd be something like, imagine the U.S.-Mexico border, so where people can filter through that border. So there's a 6,000-mile modern-day underground railroad in Asia running from North Korea through China, through Southeast Asia, ultimately to Bangkok, Thailand, where North Koreans claim their freedom. It's the largest that I'm aware of. It's currently going on today, and it resembles the Underground Railroad during the Civil War, used to help slaves escape to the north.
So defecting from North Korea is, first of all, not a simple process, but second, a lot of people get into China and still have a really difficult time of it. Can you tell some stories about that? Sure.
You have, these people are risking everything for a dream, for that dream of freedom, to escape North Korea, the regime, to live in happiness. And for many, it ends very sadly. And there are the ones that realize that dream, but for others, It ends in being captured and repatriated to North Korea, being sent to the prison camps and being beaten, tortured, and in some cases executed. Others, families are separated. Some women are abducted. One of the first North Koreans I met on that first trip was a 16-year-old girl who was abducted. She crossed into China, was abducted by traffickers and raped by them. Then she was sold for about $1,000 to a 51-year-old farmer. And it's like a market type of setting. They bring you up and put makeup on you and pretty you up, put you in nice clothes, and everyone starts bidding for the women. And it's kind of hard to imagine that this is going on. And I met more teenagers like her, and that particular woman, she lived as a sex slave, right? She was literally tied, roped down to chairs, beds, whatever it be. And it was a family operation, and all the family members, brothers, sisters, parents were involved in it. And after hearing some of those stories, I said, I had a Peace Corps application in my hand out of college, and I said, I gotta do something, and I'm going to really regret it if I don't act now.
I have to say that as I read your book, I kept thinking, if this were fiction, I would criticize it as implausible. The tortures and the sufferings, there's just too much to even take in or to believe, and yet it's real.
Yeah, North Korea is, it's been referred to as the modern-day Holocaust. You've got what Christian groups rate as number one in terms of religious persecution, being the worst. You have the largest political prison camps in the world, one of them estimated to be the size of Washington, D.C., the city itself.
The prison camp?
One prison camp the size of Washington, D.C., and estimated political prisoner population of 200,000. I'd estimate you have the largest Christian political prisons in the world as well, where we have reports of prison camps or sections of them being just for Christians, where you've got tens of thousands of Christians partitioned in one section of that gulag. And so, as you said, I mean, it's, you can't think of a worse situation in the world today.
Why isn't there an uprising? Why isn't there civil war and peasants demanding their rights?
Really, it has to do with the level of control and information, limited information, that the North Koreans have. There's no place in the world that has that level of control on the minds and level of information that they have. So, for example, in Libya, when the dictator was overthrown, the North Koreans sent a message to the hundreds of North Koreans that were there and said, "Don't come home. You don't have a country anymore because we don't want you spreading word of what happened there and encouraging the North Koreans." So you'd like to think it's a matter of time as the information flow builds up within North Korea. And you hear situations of small, what do you call that, disobedience, quote unquote, by the actual citizens, where they are going to the black market to watch movies from the West, for example, and you like to see more and more of that happen.
And that's an interesting thing to say. You'd like to see more black market. As you talk about the Underground Railroad process, you talk about lying and bribing and cheating and all.
Right.
Have you always been a criminal, Mike?
Yeah, that's a funny question. It's such an important part of the work. You cannot function without paying bribes for this type of work. And for example, one example would be when I fly into China, I live in alias there. So I lived in alias for 4 years. I had fake documents, that we made illegally. When I went in under a new name, they ask you, did you ever use a different name? So that'd be pointless for me to say, yes, here's the other name that I used. So, and I could elaborate on all of that, but, we made fake passports at one point. But I joked around with my college pastor that I never lied and bribed regularly until I went to China to do this type of work, and we got a good laugh out of that.
Yeah, I mean, and don't you have sort of internal struggles about that to do what you believe is true good, you have to do all this?
Yeah, initially I did. Yeah, I really wrestled with it. The first time paying a bribe was very awkward, it's something I did have to wrestle with, and then I got more and more comfortable with. And for me, the thought process was, and I'm not even saying that's the right thing. There would be some people that would be very against that. And for me, my conscience, that's what I came to terms with, and said the greater good would be to help people. And I think the criticism of that is that you're feeding the market. So the same type of criticism when, right now I work a lot in sex trafficking, counter sex trafficking in the U.S. The criticism of buying back women from the market is that you're feeding the market. You're creating demand by paying for the women. So even though you're ultimately freeing that woman, you just freed a life.
The system.
Yeah. You're contributing to the system. So there's this big complex argument where you have people on both sides of it. For me, I was comfortable with saving, helping hundreds of people, and doing that. We couldn't have operated without it.
How much has all this work and just your encountering the kind of suffering and pain that you've dealt with, how much did that change your view of God?
Yeah, for me, it's something I've really, I think I'm still figuring all that out. I think for me, the 4 years I spent over there, I, experienced a lot. Really, we talked about, the legal stuff, but, illegally crossing borders, using drug trafficking routes. We've been, under house arrest, and really hearing stories daily about the North Koreans and all that they had been through. Stories of cannibalism, babies, forced abortions by kicking, guards kicking stomachs, and these types of stories hearing daily. I learned quickly that we're not designed to handle that. We don't have the capacity to handle that daily, and it started to take a toll on me. Like I noticed, when I came back once a year to Chicago and spent time with my friends, they'd tell me, like, you look really fatigued, you don't look great. And so I think it did play a role on my, probably, my being burnt out at periods and exhaustion physically, mentally, spiritually, all of that. And still things I'm figuring out. But, I think I did. How to articulate how it changed my view of God, I don't know. I think I had a pretty good college pastor who really, taught the Bible very well and taught all aspects of it. It wasn't just the positive and easy times. So I think, in terms of biblical teaching, I was probably intellectually at least prepared for that.
You were aware that there's suffering in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's talk about how you began to get actively involved. You initially started with your own savings. How did you even fund this project?
July 2001, I was 24 at the time, had a financial planning business out of college, going very well, increasing clientele. Just hired my own personal assistant and was awarded for the most revenue generation in the office that month. So it was looking like a very good career. I really enjoyed helping people with their finances. I mean, it was a great job for me, got my investment licenses, and asked my assistant to clear my calendar for 2 weeks, took that trip to China, and that was a life-changing. Was that just for
curiosity's sake? Did you plan to do some volunteering?
So that trip was, it was part vacation where I was doing, the Great Wall and wanted to travel around China. I also got to visit some of the house churches there, the underground, the house churches, and that was where I met a lot of North Koreans in China. After that trip, I returned to the U.S., really decided that I've got to do something to help. So really wrestled with this decision and decided I was going to liquidate everything I had. So handed over all my clients, handed over my business, and liquidated my 401k, bought a one-way ticket to China, had about $1,000 left in my bank account, and I joked that I called my mom to tell her the good news of what had happened.
Oh boy.
You can imagine how that went.
Sure.
She was, of course, very against it. We didn't come from Korea with $400 in our bank account, and for you to do this as the oldest child, and I'm one of the oldest among our cousins, and setting a bad example, all that. Now she's one of the biggest supporters, and very glad that I did that work.
Crossing Borders' mission has kind of shifted from getting people through China to freedom toward more developing shelters and orphanages and helping people assimilate to life in China. Can you talk about that shift?
Yeah, that's right. So initially we were trying to help people get to South Korea, and the observation I had made was that everyone that had done that work is a short-term strategy because it's so high risk. You're getting captured so many times. You're spending. The Chinese will know about you, And it was within a year, everyone I knew got blacklisted, and they had to continue the work from outside the country. For one, I wanted to stay in the country and do that work. So the logical decision was, let's let other people do that important work, and let's focus on, because there's a population of North Koreans, a large population, that just want to stay in China or want to return to North Korea.
Why would they want to go back?
Yeah, and that's a question that often people often ask. There's one UN statistic that I write in the book that at the time they had estimated that 50% of North Koreans returned to North Korea. And you scratch your head, why are they going back to a place like that? Really family and friends. I mean, they want to help their family and friends, and it says something of the relational ties that people have. But it's different because they now go back with a support system where we put in some mechanism of communication with them where they come out every few months or once a year. We try to give them seed money to start a business and encourage them now, you go and help other people in North Korea. So it's different. Now they go back as people that say, I want to help other people with this help I've been given.
So during their time in China, you're helping equip them maybe with education and resources?
Yeah, education, resources, language. They learn about the outside world. And they watch South Korean cable, movies, and through all of that they learn. That's one of their favorite things. North Koreans, when they come in and can read a book, I mean, imagine for the first time not reading government propaganda or watching government propaganda. So they're glued to the TVs. They just love reading books, and those we give them the option within our shelters to, if they want, to attend a church, and really we give them the option to do whatever they would like. You've got people that just consume information and want to learn about the outside world like that.
What policy changes would you like to see in the United States and throughout the world that would help improve the situation in North Korea?
It's a difficult, very very difficult conversation. How do you deal with North Korea? I recently moderated a Council on Foreign Relations session where it was just on North Korea. North Korea 1 year later, where are we today? And we had several experts that study this for a living, and we had a great conversation on the topic. And we just discussed, that was one of the points. What does the U.S. do? I mean, one of the most recent situations was the U.S. gave I think it was hundreds of thousands of tons of food to North Korea, and how did North Korea respond with shortly after that, a test of, I think that was the rocket launch that they had done after that, and you just kind of scratch your heads.
I don't know how we work with them.
How do you deal with North Korea? And I'm not a policy expert, but I think it's definitely a difficult question for the administration to handle.
Mike, what brought you home to the United States?
Spent 4 years there, and I know for a lot of people, 4 years, makes a full term for them for different things in life. And when I went, the number I had in my head was 4 years to try and do this and to help people and return, and that was the goal for me. Another reason was that my name was getting out there as I was doing this work, and I was a trailblazer for
and that would
our
make you less effective, right?
Right, exactly, and it endangers the operations and the North Koreans. So strategically, it made sense for me to leave, and got replaced with a couple that went there in my place, and they were able to take it to the next level. Third, I was just exhausted after doing that for 4 years, and sometimes you don't realize it, but I felt like that was about as much as I could take of being in the trenches, and it'd probably be good for me to come out and start another chapter of my life.
What is that chapter looking like? You've done some writing, which I assume kind of helps you process what you've been through and what you've done, and you've written the one book, you're working on another. What else is on the horizon for you?
One of the things that's happened is after the media picked up the book is that we're working on turning it into a feature film. So it got picked up by one of the main Hollywood agencies, actually the top one right now, Creative Artists Agency, CAA. It just got moved over from WME. And we're working, we're in conversation with all the top producers, actors, directors about the possibility of this being, you go down to the theater and watch an action thriller film based on escaping North Korea. So that's something that also takes up my time. I'm also applying my business degree. I came back and did my MBA afterwards. So I'm working with a large consulting firm to build out a anti-human trafficking practice where we're applying business and technology to the human trafficking issue. So the U.S. government's a large client where we're applying data analytics, so analyzing human trafficking data to identify human traffickers and victims operating in the U.S.
And that's in the U.S. now. That's no longer the
That's
China
focused in the U.S. You know, I returned from Asia. Really, some considered me an expert on human trafficking. One of my chapters is on sex trafficking in the book. And I thought I knew a lot about it. In Asia, at least, we testified at a U.S. congressional hearing on human trafficking in China, and returned from the U.S. But I had from Asia, but I had no idea to what extent it was going on within the U.S. And it is a major problem in every major city and throughout the country, and that's something I'm really devoting a lot of energy to right now.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I wish it had been about happier things, but thanks for all you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
My guest today has been Mike Kim, author of Escaping North Korea, Defiance and Hope in the World's Most Repressive Country, and founder of Crossing Borders. I'm Karen Soppe. Thank you for watching Inner Compass.